The grand throne room was a marvel of opulence. Marble floors gleamed beneath the towering golden pillars that stretched up toward the high, vaulted ceiling. Alien symbols, both ancient and modern, were etched into the walls, glowing faintly, with an eerie light. The atmosphere was thick with the murmur of hushed voices, a mix of various species from across the galaxy. Representatives from dozens of worlds had gathered in this royal palace, standing or seated in perfect order, awaiting the arrival of their queen. At the far end of the hall, on a massive throne of black obsidian, sat the alien queen, her presence commanding and regal. Her skin was a deep, shimmering blue, and her long silver hair cascaded over her shoulders like a waterfall of light. Her eyes, glowing a faint purple, scanned the room with a calculated, authoritative gaze. Her demeanor radiated power, and every movement she made seemed to hold the weight of centuries of rulership. Around her, her most trusted advisors and generals stood in quiet reverence, their heads bowed slightly as a mark of respect. The gathered representatives, each from a different planet and species, knew the significance of this moment. They were not here for diplomacy or petty negotiations. They were here to witness the might of the Queen's rule. It was a show of power, a reminder to all that the Queen's empire stretched across the stars, and that those who dared challenge her would find themselves crushed. But there was one individual among them who didn't bow. His name was Private Alex Turner, a young human soldier standing at attention in the back of the room. His uniform, though simple compared to the majestic attire of the alien officials, was sharp and well kept. He was a stranger in this vast, alien world. His mission here just a part of the ongoing peace talks between humanity and the Queen's empire. His heart raced in his chest, but his face remained calm, steady, and unwavering. Everyone else in the room had bowed their heads to the Queen's arrival, as was customary. It was a gesture of loyalty, of deference to her supreme rule. But Alex refused. He did not lower his gaze. He did not bend his knee. He stood tall, his back straight and proud, his eyes fixed directly on the Queen. At first, no one seemed to notice. But as the moments stretched, an eerie silence spread across the room. The murmurs died down, and all eyes turned toward the lone human who remained standing. Some of the alien representatives shifted uncomfortably, exchanging nervous glances. There was an unspoken rule that one must never defy the Queen, especially not in such a public and obvious way. The Queen's expression was unreadable at first. Her gaze swept the room, pausing on each of her subjects, acknowledging them with a cold nod. Then she saw him, the human. The sight of him standing tall, unmoving, caught her attention like nothing else. Her purple eyes narrowed as she studied him, her expression hardening with a growing sense of indignation. A ripple of surprise spread through the crowd, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. The Queen's gaze never wavered from Alex as she slowly rose from her throne, her presence towering over everyone else in the room. A hush fell over the crowd as they watched in awe and fear. It was rare for the Queen to stand, especially during such a formal occasion. Her power was unmatched, and her voice alone could command the room. Finally, her voice broke the silence, sharp and filled with fury. "How dare you, human?" Her words echoed through the chamber, reverberating off the cold stone walls. Alex's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't flinch. He had been expecting this. He had been preparing himself for this moment since he had arrived on this strange alien world. But he would not bow, not to the Queen, not to anyone. He stood firm, his eyes locked with hers. "I do not bow to anyone," Alex said, his voice steady and clear, though it rang with an edge of defiance. "Not to kings, not to queens, not even to you." The room was dead silent now. The other delegates, caught off guard by Alex's boldness, looked at each other in stunned disbelief. The Queen's advisors exchanged worried glances, unsure of how to proceed. This was not a simple diplomatic incident. This was an insult, a challenge, a direct affront to the Queen's power. For a moment, the Queen said nothing, Her eyes never left Alex's, studying him as though weighing his very soul. There was something in her gaze, something almost impressed, but it was quickly replaced with a flash of rage. "How dare you challenge me?" The Queen's voice rose again, filled with a fury that could melt steel. "Do you think you are worthy to stand before me, to defy me in my own court?" Alex remained silent for a moment, choosing his words carefully. He could feel the weight of every eye in the room, all focused on him. The tension was thick, almost suffocating, but he would not break. "I don't challenge you," Alex said slowly. "I stand for what I believe in. I believe in equality, in the idea that no being, no matter their race, their power, or their status, should be above another." The Queen's eyes flashed with a dangerous light, her fists clenching at her sides. "You will regret this, human," she spat, her voice laced with venom. "You will learn that defying me comes at a cost." But Alex didn't back down. He could feel his pulse racing, but his posture remained firm. He had never been one to follow blindly, and he certainly wasn't going to start now. His entire life had been a struggle for survival, for freedom, and for equality. He wouldn't let this alien queen, or anyone, force him to bow. The Queen took a step forward, her towering figure looming over him. Her gaze softened for just a moment as if considering something. But then, she raised her chin, her regal composure returning. "You will pay for this insolence," she said, her voice low and threatening. "You will be taken to the dungeons, and you will stay there until you learn the true meaning of respect." For a moment, Alex thought he could feel the weight of the entire galaxy pressing down on him. Every instinct told him to be afraid, to step back, to apologize. But instead, he stood his ground. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The Queen turned to her captain, giving a single nod. Without another word, two of her royal guards moved forward, their heavy steps echoing across the room. But before they could reach Alex, the Queen held up her hand, halting them. Her gaze turned back to the soldier, studying him with a mix of curiosity and frustration. It was clear now that she had underestimated him, and that realization was both unsettling and intriguing. "You have spirit, human," the Queen said, her voice colder now, though tinged with something else, a hint of admiration. "But that spirit will break." Alex met her gaze, unwavering. "If you think I will bow now," he replied, "you're wrong." The Queen stared at him for a long moment, and the silence in the room stretched on. Finally, she sighed, as if weighing her options. She turned on her heel, heading back toward her throne, her posture as regal as ever. "You may not bow now," she said, her voice almost thoughtful, "but we will see how long your defiance lasts." With a final, disdainful glance in his direction, the Queen sat back upon her throne, her eyes never leaving Alex's. Alex sat in the cold, dimly lit cell, his mind racing as he replayed the events in the throne room. The metallic walls of the prison seemed to close in on him, their gray surface reflecting the faint light from a small overhead lamp. He hadn't been in this situation for long. Barely an hour had passed since the Queen's guards had dragged him away. But time felt like it stretched for an eternity. He had expected to be thrown into the dungeons, but he hadn't expected to be alone. There were no other prisoners, no other sounds. The silence was overwhelming. He leaned back against the cold stone wall, closing his eyes and taking a deep breath. His heart still raced with the adrenaline of the confrontation. He couldn't believe he'd stood up to the Queen, not in front of so many alien eyes. But he had, and now he was paying the price for it. The sound of footsteps echoed down the narrow hallway outside his cell. Alex's body tensed instinctively. His mind flashed back to the Queen's threat. "You will learn the true meaning of respect." He wasn't sure what that meant, but it sounded like it would hurt. The footsteps grew louder, stopping just outside his cell. A faint click of metal signaled the opening of the door. Two guards stood in the doorway, their dark eyes fixed on Alex as they stepped inside. Neither spoke a word. They moved swiftly, their imposing figures casting long shadows. Across the floor, Alex didn't flinch. He had faced far worse before during his time in the military. If the Queen thought this would break him, she was wrong. He knew how to endure. He knew how to fight. But he also knew that there was something different about this situation. He wasn't in his world anymore. These weren't human soldiers. These were aliens, beings whose rules and customs he couldn't yet understand. "Get up," one of the guards barked, his voice low and menacing. Alex slowly pushed himself to his feet, keeping his eyes locked on the guards. He didn't know what they wanted, but he wasn't going to make it easy for them. The guards exchanged a glance before one of them motioned for Alex to follow. They led him through the winding corridors of the palace, their footsteps echoing off the cold stone walls. The palace, which had once seemed so magnificent, now felt like a maze, a prison made of gold and marble. Alex's mind raced, trying to figure out what his next move should be. He couldn't stay in that cell forever. He had to get out. He had to figure out what the Queen wanted, what her game was. Eventually, they arrived at a large chamber, a hall that seemed to stretch endlessly in front of them. The high ceilings were lined with intricate alien designs, glowing faintly with an ethereal light. A large window on the far wall overlooked the vastness of the alien city outside, with its twisting spires and bustling streets. It was beautiful in a way, but Alex couldn't afford to admire the view. The guard stopped in front of a pair of massive doors, decorated with golden symbols that shimmered in the light. One of the guards knocked twice, and the door opened, with a soft hiss. They motioned for Alex to enter. Inside, the Queen sat on her throne once again. But this time her demeanor was different. There was no rage in her eyes, no fury like before. Instead, there was a calculating calmness, a coolness that sent a shiver down Alex's spine. She was still powerful, but now she was watching him, like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. "Private Alex Turner," the Queen said, her voice smooth and measured. "You have made quite an impression on me." Alex didn't say anything. He simply stood there, his posture straight, waiting for her to continue. "You have defied me in front of my court," the Queen continued. "You have refused to bow, and you have insulted my authority. But I find myself intrigued." She leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. "You are different from the others. You are not like the others who serve me, who cower in fear. You stand your ground even when faced with certain punishment. Tell me, human, why?" Alex met her gaze without hesitation. He wasn't sure what to say, but he wasn't going to back down now. "I stand for what I believe in. I don't believe that any one species should be superior to another. I don't believe in blindly bowing to power." The Queen smiled, though it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who enjoyed the challenge of a worthy opponent. "I see. You believe in equality. How quaint." She paused, studying him for a moment. "Do you understand the consequences of your actions, human? You have insulted me, and now you will pay the price." Alex's heart raced, but he kept his composure. "If this is about punishment, then fine. I'll face it. But I'm not going to apologize for what I believe in." The Queen's smile faltered for a moment. "I am not asking you to apologize, but I will not let this go without teaching you a lesson. You will learn what it means to defy me, to stand against my authority." She stood from her throne, walking down the steps toward him with graceful, calculated steps. Her presence was overwhelming, her eyes locked on his like a hawk circling its prey. "I am not like the others you have faced. I am the Queen of this empire. I rule the stars, and you, human, will bow to me, or you will be broken." Alex stood tall, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his chest. He knew she had the power to do whatever she wanted. She could destroy him with a single word, with a wave of her hand, but he wouldn't give her that satisfaction. He couldn't. Not after everything humanity had been through. "I won't bow," Alex said, his voice low but firm. "Not to you, not to anyone." The Queen stopped in front of him, her eyes searching his face as though trying to read his every thought. For a long moment she said nothing. Then with a sharp movement she raised her hand, and the guards who had been standing silently at the sides of the room, stepped forward. "You will face a trial, human," she said, her voice cold as ice. "A trial of strength, of courage, and of will. You will prove to me that you are worthy of standing before me." Alex didn't know what to expect, but he knew it wasn't going to be easy. He didn't have the luxury of retreating into the safety of his own world. This was an alien empire, and he was at their mercy. But if there was one thing he had learned during his time in the military, it was this: never give up, never surrender, not when it mattered most. The guards moved in close, each taking hold of one of his arms, ready to lead him to whatever the Queen had planned next. But Alex didn't resist. He walked with them willingly, his mind already racing with strategies, trying to figure out what he could do to survive the Queen's trial. "You will learn," the Queen said as Alex was led away. "You will learn what it truly means to face me." The cold stone floor beneath Alex's boots echoed as he was led down a long, dark corridor. The silence around him was suffocating, and the tension in the air was thick. His hands were bound by thick metal cuffs, and though the guards walked with him, their footsteps barely made a sound. Their presence was like a constant shadow, always there, always watching. His mind raced with questions. What kind of trial was the Queen going to put him through? Was this some kind of test of physical strength, or would it be something more psychological? He had no idea, but one thing was certain: he had to face it. No matter what happened, he wasn't going to back down. He wasn't going to bow to her. The hallway seemed endless, stretching on and on as they descended deeper into the heart of the palace. The walls were lined with intricate carvings and alien symbols that he couldn't begin to understand. True, architecture of the palace was both beautiful and intimidating, a constant reminder of the Queen's power. Eventually, they arrived at a large metallic door, its surface smooth and dark. One of the guards stepped forward and punched a code into a small panel beside the door. There was a soft hiss, and the door slid open, revealing a large chamber inside. The room was vast, with high ceilings that disappeared into shadows. The air was thick with the scent of unknown chemicals and strange metallic odors. Inside the chamber stood a series of strange machines, their shapes unlike anything Alex had ever seen. Some were tall and slender, while others were short and bulky. Covered in glowing lights and intricate wires, the entire room hummed with energy, and Alex could feel the static in the air as he stepped inside. "Welcome to the trial, human." The Queen's voice echoed through the room, cold and commanding. Alex looked around, trying to locate her, but she wasn't in sight. Her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. He didn't speak, but his heart raced as he tried to figure out what was happening. This was it, the moment he would either prove himself or fall. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to do, but he knew that he couldn't give up. He wouldn't let her break him. The door behind him slammed shut with a heavy thud, and the sound reverberated through the chamber. The guard stepped back, leaving Alex alone in the vast room. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, the floor beneath Alex's feet began to shift. The ground trembled as mechanical panels slid open, revealing small, glowing orbs that hovered just above the floor. They were like eyes watching him. The orbs pulsed with energy, casting eerie lights across the room. Alex's eyes narrowed as he watched them. He had no idea what they were, but he knew one thing: he was going to have to face whatever they were. Without warning, the orbs shot toward him, moving faster than he could react. They were small, but their speed was blinding, and before he could move, one of them slammed into his chest. The impact was like a jolt of electricity running through his body, and he gasped as his muscles locked up, the shock paralyzing him for a split second. Another orb darted toward him, and this time, Alex was ready. He ducked, narrowly avoiding the hit, and quickly rolled to the side, his heart pounding in his chest. The orbs circled around him, flashing and darting in all directions, their movements erratic and unpredictable. He stood up, trying to get his bearings. The shock from the first orb still had his body feeling numb, but he couldn't afford to let it distract him. He couldn't let himself fail. Not here, not now. The orbs shot toward him again, faster than before, and this time, Alex was ready. He moved with quick, calculated precision, dodging and weaving between them. One orb brushed past his shoulder, its energy leaving a tingling sensation on his skin. Another orb came from above, and Alex barely managed to leap out of the way in time, the orb whizzing past his head. His breath came in ragged gasps as the orbs closed in on him, moving in patterns that seemed designed to confuse and disorient. But Alex's training kicked in. He knew how to think fast, how to stay calm in the midst of chaos. With a burst of energy, he leapt forward, throwing himself into a roll as he reached one of the machines along the wall. He used it as cover, his heart still racing as he tried to catch his breath. The orbs were relentless, but Alex knew he couldn't keep hiding. He had to fight back. With one quick glance at the glowing orbs, Alex noticed something. There was a pattern to their movements. They weren't just attacking at random. They were waiting for him to make a mistake, to slip up. Alex gritted his teeth and steadied himself. He wasn't going to make a mistake. The orbs shot toward him again, but this time Alex was ready. He timed his movements perfectly, dodging one orb and then another, using the space between them to his advantage. He ran toward the nearest orb, ducking as it tried to strike him, and with a quick move he swatted it out of the air, sending it crashing into the wall. It exploded in a flash of light, but Alex didn't flinch. The remaining orb seemed to hesitate for a moment, and Alex used that to his advantage. He sprinted forward, moving with incredible speed as he dodged another orb and kicked one to the side. The orbs swarmed around him, but he was faster now, more in control. One by one he took them down, his movements a blur of precision. The last orb, the one that had been the most persistent, came at him with a final desperate lunge. But Alex was ready. He timed his movements perfectly, leaping forward and slamming the orb against the ground with a swift kick. The room fell silent. The orbs were no longer moving, and the chamber was still. Alex stood panting, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. His muscles burned, and the shock from the first orb still lingered in his limbs. But he had done it. He had survived. There was a long moment of silence before the Queen's voice filled the room again, this time tinged with something unexpected. It wasn't anger or disdain. It was something closer to respect. "Well done, human," she said. "You have passed the first trial." Alex didn't respond. He simply stood there, still catching his breath, his body aching from the intensity of the trial. But he didn't feel fear anymore. He felt something else, something stronger. He had faced the Queen's challenge, and he had won. But this was only the beginning. He knew there were more trials ahead, more challenges that would test him in ways he couldn't yet imagine. But he was ready. He wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not ever. The echo of Alex's footsteps filled the long hallway as he walked, his body still sore from the trial he had just completed. The Queen's chamber was ahead, but the air felt different now. He wasn't sure if it was the weight of the trials ahead or the sheer exhaustion that clung to his every step. But the palace no longer felt like a place of power and glory. It felt like a maze, one with no clear way out. His mind was still racing. The orbs had been difficult, but it wasn't just their speed or their unpredictability that had tested him. It was the pressure to survive, to prove himself. He had been pushed to the brink of his limits, but somehow he had held on. He hadn't given up. And that was the most important thing. But as he walked through the hall, his thoughts kept drifting back to the Queen. What did she really want from him? Why had she put him through that trial? She was powerful. He knew that. But there was something more in her eyes when she watched him, something that spoke of curiosity, perhaps even respect. He hadn't expected that. The Queen wasn't like the others he had met in the galaxy. She wasn't just an enemy to be defeated. She was different. The hallway ended, and Alex was met by two guards who stood at attention, their eyes cold and unreadable. Without a word, they stepped aside, allowing him to pass. He knew what this meant. The second trial was about to begin. The doors to the Queen's chamber opened with a soft hiss, and Alex walked in. The Queen was seated on her throne once again, her regal posture as commanding as ever. Her presence was imposing, but Alex stood firm. He had faced her once, and he would face her again. This time, though, something felt different. The tension in the air was palpable, and Alex could sense it. This was the moment. Whatever the Queen had in mind for him now, it would be even more challenging than the last trial. The Queen's eyes met his as he entered, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. There was an unspoken understanding between them. She was not just testing his strength anymore, she was testing something deeper, his resolve, his will, his heart. "You did well in the first trial," the Queen said, her voice smooth, yet there was something almost admiring in it. "But that was only a taste of what's to come." Alex didn't reply. He wasn't sure what to say. He wasn't here to please her with words. He was here to prove that he could survive whatever she threw at him. The Queen stood from her throne, her movements graceful, fluid. "Now, we move to the second trial," she continued. "This one will test your mind, your ability to think quickly under pressure. You will face a challenge that requires more than just strength. It will require you to outwit your opponent." Alex's brow furrowed. Outwit his opponent? He didn't know what kind of game the Queen was playing, but he wasn't about to back down now. The Queen snapped her fingers, and a large door on the far side of the room slid open. From within, a figure stepped forward, tall, armored, and imposing. The figure's face was hidden behind a helmet, but there was no mistaking the power that radiated from them. This was no ordinary warrior. This was the Queen's personal champion, the one who had been sent to challenge him. "Your opponent," the Queen said, her tone now more serious. "This warrior has been trained in combat, strategy, and tactics. He will push you to your limits. But remember, this trial is not about brute strength. It's about outsmarting your opponent." The armored figure stepped forward, and Alex could feel the air shift. The pressure was mounting again, but this time, it wasn't just the fear of physical combat that gripped him. This was a game of the mind, and that was where the true test lay. Alex's eyes met the champion's, and for a moment there was silence. Then, without warning, the champion lunged forward, moving with incredible speed. Alex barely had time to react, but he instinctively dropped to the ground, narrowly avoiding the warrior's strike. The sound of metal scraping against the stone floor echoed through the room. Alex's heart raced as he scrambled to his feet. He had to think fast. The champion was quick, and the warrior's armor made it impossible to predict their movements. Alex couldn't rely on sheer strength to win this battle. He needed to outsmart them, find a way to turn the tide in his favor. The warrior came at him again, swinging a heavy sword in a wide arc. Alex ducked and rolled, narrowly avoiding the blow. He could hear the blade whistle through the air as it missed him by inches, but he didn't have much time. The champion's attacks were relentless, and Alex had to find an opening. He spotted a small piece of debris lying on the floor, something that had been knocked over during their fight. It was just a rock, but it was enough. With a quick move, Alex grabbed the rock and threw it toward the warrior's helmet. The stone hit with a sharp crack, momentarily disorienting the champion. Alex seized the opportunity. He lunged forward, using the momentum from the rock to knock the champion off balance. With a quick move, he disarmed them, sending the sword clattering to the ground. The champion was now unarmed, but the fight wasn't over. The Queen watched. From her throne, her eyes narrowed as she observed the struggle. She had seen many battles in her time, but this was different. This human, this soldier, was not like the others. He wasn't relying on sheer force or brute strength. He was using his mind, his instincts, and his adaptability. Alex didn't hesitate. With one swift motion, he pinned the champion to the ground, his knee pressing into their chest. The armored figure struggled beneath him, but Alex held firm. Room fell silent. The Queen's eyes never left the two of them. She had not expected this outcome. The trial had been designed to test Alex's intellect, and in that moment it was clear that he had passed. "You have done well," the Queen said, her voice carrying across the chamber. "You have proven that you are more than just a soldier. You are a strategist, a thinker. You have passed the second trial. Alex stood up, breathing heavily, his muscles aching from the fight. But there was no time to rest. The trials were far from over. The Queen had tested him physically, and now, mentally. But what was the final trial? What else did she have in store for him? The Queen stepped down from her throne, her eyes still locked on Alex. "The third trial awaits you," she said, her voice calm, but filled with an intensity that made Alex's blood run cold. "It will be the hardest of all. It will test your very soul." Alex's heart skipped a beat. The hardest of all? What could be harder than what he had already faced? The Queen motioned for the guards to step forward. "Take him to the final trial," she commanded. "And may he be ready." As Alex was led out of the chamber, he couldn't help but wonder what the final trial would entail. He had faced strength and strategy, but what lay ahead? The Queen had said it would test his soul. That was a terrifying thought, but Alex wasn't afraid. He had come this far and he wasn't about to back down now. Whatever came next, he would face it. He had to. For humanity. For himself. The silence in the hallway felt suffocating as Alex was escorted by the guards. His legs felt heavy, each step taking more effort than the last, but he kept moving forward. The weight of the Queen's words from earlier still echoed in his mind. "The third trial will test your very soul." What could that possibly mean? He had faced physical challenges, mental challenges, and now, it seemed, he would face something far deeper. But what was it? What more could they throw at him? The palace was eerily quiet now, almost as though it was holding its breath. The towering walls, the cold, polished floors, it all seemed to blur together as Alex walked, lost in thought. He had fought and won before, but this was different. He could feel the heaviness in the air, the tension. Whatever was waiting for him, it wouldn't be a test of strength or strategy. The guards didn't speak as they led him down yet another, winding corridor, the walls narrowing as they went deeper into the palace. There was something almost oppressive about the way the palace was built, like it was designed to make you feel small, insignificant, and utterly powerless. But Alex wasn't about to let it break him. He had faced challenges before. He had been through enough to know that pressure could either crush you or make you stronger. At last they arrived at another door, massive and ornate. The guards didn't need to say a word. They opened it and motioned for Alex to step inside. He took a deep breath, steeling himself, and walked through. The room was dim, the only light coming from soft, glowing crystals embedded in the walls. The air smelled faintly of incense, a strange mixture of fragrances he had never encountered before. The space was large, but it felt confined in a way, as if the walls themselves were closing in. And there, in the center of the room, was a single chair. The Queen sat in front of it, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the crystals. She looked as regal as ever, but there was a different energy about her now, something almost dangerous. Her eyes locked onto Alex's the moment he entered, and in that instant he felt a chill run down his spine. She was waiting, and this time, it was not just his body or his mind that would be tested. "Sit," the Queen commanded, her voice low and steady. Alex didn't hesitate. He walked forward and sat in the chair. His muscles were sore from the previous trials, but he forced himself to relax. This wasn't a fight. He had to remind himself of that. This wasn't a test of strength or strategy. This was something else, something deeper. The Queen stood and walked slowly around him, her gaze never leaving him. The silence was thick, and Alex could feel his heart beating in his chest, but he remained still. What was this trial? What was she going to do to him? "You have faced the trials of strength and intellect," the Queen began, her voice almost soothing, though there was an edge to it. "But now you face the hardest test of all, the test of your soul." Alex's breath caught in his throat. The Queen had said those words before, but now they felt real. The air in the room grew heavier and Alex's mind raced. What did that mean? What kind of test was she referring to? "You may think you know yourself, human," the Queen continued, her voice echoing in the stillness. "But the true test, of a being's soul comes when they are forced to confront their deepest fears, their darkest truths. I will show you what lies beneath the surface of your being. You will be faced with choices that will define you. Will you be the hero you think yourself to be, or will you succumb to the darkness inside you? Alex's heart pounded faster. This was no ordinary trial. The Queen was speaking in riddles, but he understood one thing clearly. This wasn't about physical strength, and it wasn't about strategy. This was about something more personal, something that could break him. And that thought terrified him. The room seemed to shift, the shadows lengthening as if the walls themselves were closing in. A soft light began to pulse from the crystals, in the walls growing brighter with each passing second. Alex could feel his breath quickening, but he forced himself to remain calm. He had to stay focused. He couldn't let fear take over. Suddenly, the room went dark. Complete and utter darkness. Alex's heart raced, and for a moment he couldn't breathe. The air felt thick, almost suffocating. He tried to move, but his limbs felt heavy, as though they were made of lead. The only sound in the darkness was his own breathing, quick and erratic. And then, a voice whispered, barely audible, "Do you remember the first time you fought for something important? The first time you were truly afraid?" The voice seemed to come from all directions at once, making Alex's skin crawl. His pulse quickened, and his eyes strained to see, but the darkness was absolute. His body tensed, instinctively trying to prepare for whatever was coming next. "I remember," he whispered, his voice trembling slightly. The memories flooded back. He had been just a boy when he had first been thrust into a life-or-death situation, when the reality of war had crashed into him like a wave. He remembered the fear, the uncertainty, the desperation. It had been his first real fight, the first time he had ever truly understood what it meant to lose everything. The darkness seemed to pulse around him, and another whisper followed. "Do you remember what you were willing to sacrifice to survive? What you were willing to give up?" Alex clenched his fists, trying to shake off the feeling of dread that settled over him. This was a test. Just like the Queen had said, he had to keep his wits about him. He couldn't let the darkness overwhelm him. "I remember," he said again, his voice steady this time. "I did what I had to do to survive." The voice chuckled softly, a sound that chilled him to the bone. "Do you? Or did you become something you never thought you would be? A killer, a destroyer of lives. Do you still believe you are the hero in your own story, Alex?" The question hung in the air, and for the first time doubt crept into Alex's mind. He had always seen himself as a soldier, a protector. But had he truly always made the right choices? Had he become the person he had sworn never to be? The darkness around him seemed to press in tighter, making it harder to think. "I've done things I regret," Alex admitted, his voice quieter now. The weight of those memories was like a stone in his chest. "But I did what I thought was right. I had no choice." "Ah," the voice murmured, growing softer. "The choices we make, the paths we choose, sometimes we do them without thinking, without considering the cost. But you had a choice, didn't you, Alex? Or did you?" Alex's breath caught in his throat. The words echoed in his mind, a sharp reminder of the things he had done, the people he had hurt, the things he had sacrificed. His soul felt heavy with the weight of his past actions. "I did have a choice," he whispered, almost to himself. "I always had a choice." The darkness began to recede, slowly at first, then faster, until the soft, glowing light returned, and Alex found himself once again in the center of the Queen's chamber. The Queen stood before him, her eyes watching him intently, and for the first time Alex saw something different in them, something that wasn't just power or control. There was understanding. "You passed the third trial," the Queen said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "You faced your fears, your doubts, and your past, and you chose to accept them." Alex's body felt drained, as though he had just run a marathon. But he was still standing, still breathing. He had faced the trial, and in some way, he had emerged stronger. The Queen had tested his soul, his very being, and in doing so, she had shown him something he hadn't fully realized before. His past didn't define him. His choices did. "You have proven yourself, Alex," the Queen continued, her voice still calm, but with a note of approval. "You are no longer just a soldier. You are something more. Something I can respect." Alex's heart still raced, but now it was with something else. Something deeper. Something he couldn't quite explain. But he knew one thing for sure. He had passed the Queen's final test, and in doing so, he had proved to himself that he was capable of more than he had ever imagined. As the Queen motioned for the guards to approach, Alex stood tall, feeling a sense of peace that had eluded him for so long. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a man who had faced his darkest fears and come out the other side. And that was enough.